Good evening and welcome. My name is Bridget Quinn. I'm the President and CEO of the Hartford Public Library, and I am thrilled to welcome you to Beyond Words 2023. Thank you for being here. Please keep eating, keep drinking. The food stations are still open, the bars are still open, so don't feel like you can't get up if you need another plate of salad or whatever it is. It's just please help yourself. But we want to get started because we've got some really wonderful things to share with you this evening. Just quick show of hands. How many of you here tonight are here for the first time? Oh, wow. Welcome, welcome, welcome. That's so exciting. And how many of you have been here at least 1 year? Before. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming back. So welcome to all of our new friends joining us. We hope to see you in future years. And of course, thank you to those who have been with us year after year. It's really wonderful to have your support and have you keep coming back to join us for this lovely event. It's a really special evening. We are honored to have renowned author Ayanna Mathis here with us this evening. She is going to be sharing her new work, The Unsettled, which you see is on the table in front of you. And we're also conferring the Caroline Hewins Medal this evening, which will be a bit of a bittersweet tribute to someone who not only deserves a recognition, but has certainly earned it. Beyond Words and the programs and services supported through the funds that we raised this evening would not be possible without the support of our sponsors, who are incredibly generous. And I want to acknowledge our presenting sponsor, Global Atlantic, and our honorary chair, who's Dan O'Shea from Global Atlantic, and also on our board. The Caroline M. Hewins medalist sponsors, the Mandel Bronstein family, Travelers, Bank of America, and Beth and Rick Costello. Thank you so much. Our book sponsors, Aries and The Hartford. And our novel sponsors, M&T Bank, Wilmington Trust. Thank you so much. And of course, our poetry and chapter sponsors, too, you see up on the screen. We are so thankful for the support that we receive through our corporate and philanthropic sponsors. You make tonight and many, many special things that happen at the public library happen because of your generosity. The board of the library is an incredible group of people, passionate, committed, engaged, and I feel so fortunate to work for and alongside of them to lead the organization. Would the board members please stand who are in the room? Thank you all. Thank you all so much for your service. Hartford Public Library also has ambassadors, or a group of committed library supporters who volunteer, attend events and programs, and help promote the work of HPL. And I know we have a number of ambassadors in the room, too. Would you also please stand? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. A shout out of thanks to the Beyond Words Committee, our honorary chair, Dan O'Shea, and all the volunteers that helped this evening. To our event organizer extraordinaire, Gilda Roncari. And the HPL team assisting with the sound, video, augmented reality, and logistics, or virtual reality. Mark, I always mess that up, I'm sorry. But that cool thing that's going on out there, and the logistics for the event. Thank you. So for those of you who have been to Beyond Words in the past, you know this is the part of the program where I ask the mayor to come up and say a few words of welcome. But this year, we're saving that for the end of the program. So I don't really know what to do. Oh, wait, I have an idea. I think we happen to have somebody who could lend a hand. How about a welcome from the mayor-elect? Please welcome Arunan Aralempalam.
Thank you guys so much. Oh, thank you. That means the world to me. I am a poor fill-in for Luke, and I got told about this about 5 minutes ago, so please excuse my brevity here. But I'm not just a mayor-elect, I'm also a board member. About 8 years ago, I went over to Jerry Sullivan's house, and Jerry is a mentor for so many of us here. And she said, I think you need to get more involved in the city in some way. And Luke Bronin just went off the library board, and there's an opening, and I'm going to put your name up for it. And so I went and I sat down with Greg Davis and Thea Montanez, and I talked about the library, and they put me on the board. So I just wanted a word of caution. I'm going to have to cycle off this library board. Be careful who you give that seat to, because they might be the next mayor. But when I sat down, with Greg and Thea, I talked to them about the importance of libraries to me growing up as an immigrant kid. Every Saturday morning, my mom would take us to the library, and I'd load up the maximum amount of books they let me take. And libraries just opened my world and opened my mind, and were such a huge part of my development. They bridged the gap in terms of resources that kids who grew up in different settings and different households had. And as I walk into our library, and we're right around the corner from the Park Street branch of the library, and if any of you have not yet been, let's give that a round of applause. If there's anybody here, I see Graciela in the back, if there's anybody here who hasn't been to the Park Street branch of the library, I encourage you to go. We've got 5 small kids, and they're there. Graciela will tell you all the time. In fact, our little one was there today, I think. And every day they are opening the worlds and minds of so many kids around our city. And our kids deserve these sanctuaries, our schools, our libraries, these places where kids can be in a different world, where they can be transformed and think and imagine in much bigger ways. And so it's been such a pride to me to be on this board, to be a small part of this progress, and to watch the incredible staff at the Hartford Public Library. And it is such an honor today that they're honoring Luke Bronin, who has been such a champion for this city and for all of the people in this city. But when tough decisions had to be made, somebody who understood the importance of libraries, not just as repositories for books, but as centers for our communities. So I'm so proud to welcome you here. I'm so proud of Luke and the work you've done over the last 8 years, and so proud of the Hartford Public Library. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mayor-elect. I like saying that. And now it is a pleasure for me to introduce the chair of our board, David Barrett.
Good evening. So I think you can see why I feel it's such an honor. It's awesome to see all of you here. And let me join Bridget in thanking you for joining us this evening. I have a couple of additional thank yous of my own. On behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to express our thanks to 3 outstanding board members whose terms ended in October: Andrew Diaz-Matos, Ana Alfaro, and Greg Davis. Anna's not here, right? Anna's not here. Would they? I know Andrew and Greg are here. Would you? Anna's here. And Anna, would you all please stand up? Now, Greg, you can't sit down yet. So I just want to point out, thanks to Anna, we have a Park Street Library, and after all of these years, that was, that Arunan mentioned, is just a sight to behold. Thanks to Andrew, we have the development and the fundraising has blossomed almost beyond what we could have imagined. And Greg, I just can't think. Greg has been a mentor to me. The leadership of the library, the effort that he's put in over more than 2 decades of work. You will be missed, and you'll be missed beyond words. So thank you both, all 3. Now, no one needs to remind you of the flood at the main library last Christmas. While disastrous, it has made us stronger through expanded community partnerships and through more focus paid to our branches. None of that would have been possible without our library staff. They have not missed a beat, providing the same high-quality service no matter the location or the circumstance. And I would like our staff who are here to please stand up for a round of applause. So next year, we will celebrate our 250th anniversary. Amazing, huh? When I worked at the Hartford Courant, which some of you know I did, we used to boast that the newspaper, founded in 1764, was older than the nation. Well, so is Hartford Public Library, founded in 1774. We are older than the nation. Now we have a visual prompt here. Check page 14 of your program for a list of the exciting events we are planning throughout the year to celebrate our birthday, starting with birthday parties in the branches in January, and including welcoming you and all of our community back to what we know will be a restored and renewed downtown library sometime next summer or fall. Please know that your generosity and support is deeply appreciated. Because of you, we can and will continue to bring world-class library service to the people of Hartford. Now, please join me in welcoming to the stage Dan O'Shea, a fellow board member, a Chief Administrative Officer of Global Atlantic, our presenting sponsor.
Appreciate it, David. Thank you. David, thank you. It's really amazing to be in this room tonight with so many people who care so deeply about this library. I'm honored to be up here representing not only the board, but Global Atlantic Financial Group, and it really, really is a thrill to be here. And thank you for my colleagues at Global Atlantic for joining me. You know, our theme every year here is beyond words, and it's fitting. Because if you think about the Hartford Public Library, it's not just about books. It's beyond books. It's beyond words. For me, and I agree with you, Arunan, it's a sanctuary. These libraries are places where our citizens go to get the services and programs that they need, a lifeline for education, for opportunity, and essential for this capital city to thrive. But if we are talking about words, there's one word that came to my mind as I thought about the Hartford Public Library's amazing staff and what they've been through over the past 3 years, and that word is resilience. It's a word that has embodied this organization since its founding 1774. If you are going to be around for a quarter of a millennium, you need some resilience. And so this staff embodies that. Unbelievably so. Now, David references, I remember getting that email on Christmas Day last year. Arunan, you're nodding your head. A lot of us got that email. There was a flood in the downtown library, and at that point, we didn't know how extensive it was, but what we did know that it was going to be pretty bad, and that we were going to have to close the branch for the foreseeable future. And that for this staff that had worked so hard coming through COVID, to be able to get some momentum and getting people back into those branches was devastating. But what did Bridget and her team do? Well, knowing Bridget, she probably poured herself at Tito's, but right after that, go ahead, you can applaud for that, that's fine. They pivoted and they sent all of these services to our other branches. And I got a few stats here that I wanted to share with you, which I find to be quite extraordinary. The first 6 months of 2023 compared to the first 6 months of 2022, with the flagship downtown branch closed. Visits have increased from 43,000 to more than 123,000 people. A 200% increase. Program attendance has increased by almost 50%. User registration is up by 130%. Circulation of materials, 85%. I can go on. Let those numbers sink in. That doesn't happen without Bridget and the extraordinary staff at this library showing an amazing amount of resilience. So please join me in thanking them for what they've done. So we here at Global Atlantic, we believe in this city. We believe in Hartford. We are committed to this city. We're in the throes right now of actually doubling our office space around the corner at the Gold Building. It is really important that, Mayor-elect, I'll take it, thank you. It's really important for us to be able to invest in the communities in which we live and in which we work. And so on behalf of all of us, thank you. It's great to be a title sponsor of this evening, so appreciate that. This city has, I think, really bright days ahead of it. And I just want to take an opportunity while I'm up here, Luke, just 8 years of extraordinary work for this city in the trajectory that it is on. Very different, I would say, than the trajectory you inherited. And so really appreciate that, appreciate the support that you've given to this institution. It really has meant a lot. And Arunan, congrats, man. Looking forward to working with you in this new capacity. It'll be fun. So before I move on here, I would just ask that you join me one more time in applauding and thanking Bridget and team for taking what was an unbelievable challenge that was thrown their way, not missing a beat and turning it into an advantage and setting a new direction for this library and how it can support this amazing city. So please join me in thanking Bridget. And then finally, thank you to all of you here this evening. So grateful for you to have taken the time out of your busy schedules to come be here. It's amazing to see the support that this institution has. Tonight's event helps ensure that we have the financial support to provide critical programming and services to this community. It's vital work, and it's work that can't happen without your support. And so I really thank you for being here. Now with that, let me move things along on the agenda. So it is my pleasure to be able to present our 2023 Beyond Words featured author, Ayanna Mathis. Now, Ayanna's first novel, The 12 Tribes of Hattie, was a New York Times bestseller, an NPR Best Book of 2013, was longlisted for the Dublin Literary Award, and was nominated for the Hurston Wright Foundation's Legacy Award. Joining this accomplished author we have the privilege to have here tonight is Hartford Public Library Ambassador and good friend, Doobie McDowell. Together, they're going to be discussing the book that you have right on your tables, which, by the way, we have signed. Thank you very much, Ayanna, for writing all of those out. The Unsettled, I have no doubt that soon we'll be talking about The Unsettled as a New York Times bestseller. And so please join me in welcoming them to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ayanna. Wonderful to have you here. Now that you have sat down, I'm going to ask you to stand up. Because there's nothing like hearing an author read from their own work, and we're going to start off with you reading from The Unsettled.
I should say, to begin, that I'm very honored to be here. I'm very grateful. I just found out this evening about the flood last year, so this seems like an extra special, an extra important moment for the library system, and for all of you who are here with your. I've learned from some great people who were guests at fundraisers, and so, you can sort of say, all you great people that are here with your checkbooks. In any case, I'm very, very delighted to be here. And this book has three central characters. Two of them are adults. One is a woman who lives in the South named Duchess. The other character is her daughter, who's an adult. And the third character, and I'm going to read a little bit from a section of his, is a kid named Toussaint. And he's a kid who's in some difficulties when we encounter him in the book. And given that tonight is all about libraries, and of course we know that libraries support adults enormously, but libraries also are of utterly and completely inestimable value to children. And so I'm going to read from this kid's voice. He's 10 when we meet him. He's in a rough spot. This is the prologue of the novel. The novel is called The Unsettled. Toussaint Wright stepped onto Ephraim Avenue with a backpack slung over his shoulder and a bleeding cut on his cheek. He was 13 years old. 2 years before, a fire had consumed 248 Ephraim Avenue, where Toussaint used to live. The fire destroyed most everything he loved. Nothing remained but a few girders inside the charred hull of the house and a scorched old oak tree out front. Toussaint had passed through many homes since then, group homes and foster homes, the rectory of a pastor he once knew, but he always busted out of them. Now he stood a long time on Ephraim, watching browned leaves falling from the oak. The gutter pipe on house number 248 came loose and bent with a metallic shriek that sent a flock of sparrows flying off into the night. Toussaint had not eaten in 2 days. He had run most of the way, stopping to catch his breath behind parked cars or in alleys. His heart was beating too fast. His blood ran like water. He touched his hand to the cut on his cheek and felt something small and hard protruding. Glass. Earlier, in another part of the city, some boys who hung around the same corner Toussaint had been hanging around had asked him a couple of questions. Why are you always alone? And why you don't never talk? You ain't got no mama or a grandmama or something? The answers to these questions were unbearable. Sometimes grief came on him like a sweeping numbness, up from his toes and along his neck so he couldn't swallow. Other times it was a column of rage rising along his spine. In answer to the boy's questions, he picked up a brick. He picked up a brick and threw it through the glass window of an abandoned storefront on the corner. Then he ran. On Ephraim Avenue, he stomped his feet to warm himself. His sneakers thudded against the asphalt. The sound rang in the cold, empty air, so he stomped again, harder this time. The block was all shadows, as though the night was more night there than anywhere else. He pried off a piece of plywood nailed over the doorway of 248. This took the last of his strength. He ducked through the opening he'd made and entered the house. Yo, yo, yo! Yo! He called, just to hear his voice echo down the hallway. Toussaint settled in the warmest corner with a blanket, a sandwich he'd taken off a passed-out drunk, and a sheaf of letters from his mother, who wrote to him every week from Holmesburg prison, even though he couldn't stand to go and see her. He had letters from his grandmother, too. Her name was Duchess. She lived in a place called Bonaparte in Alabama. He was on his way there. He was really going this time. Toussaint fell into a jerky, shivering sleep and dreamed of throwing the brick through the glass window all over again. Filaments of glass caught in the streetlight and glowed as they fell. The glass rain sparkled like tinsel.
Before we get into the book, I do have to ask you what it's like to be heralded after your first book as the new Toni Morrison, and then try to sit down and write a second book?
I mean, you know, what was helpful about that is because it's not true. And I knew that it wasn't, so I was like, well, it's a lovely compliment, but, you know. I mean, those are obviously unfillable shoes, and nobody ever will, and honestly, I don't think anyone's actually trying, you know.
Right.
There are other shoes, but not those shoes.
Right. But is there I'm interested in the pressure.
Yeah, I mean, this book took almost 8 years, I suppose. And in part of the reason that it took so long is because I think you know, I mean, the sort of Toni Morrison comment was part of it, you know, but I mean, it was an Oprah Book Club pick, and so it was very, very noisy, and it was a very big book for a first book, or for any book, really, which kind of really caught me off guard. So it was a great blessing, but you know, as they say, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So it's like, what were the costs of that? And you know, I mean, writing is an incredibly private thing, right? It's very quiet, it's very contemplative, it's very, you know, all of these things, and then it requires a certain amount of quiet and privacy in order to sort of hear your own voice, right? In order for your sort of discernment, like, this sentence is working, this sentence is not working, this storyline isn't, you know, all these little decisions that you're making all the time. And for a long time, it just sort of felt like my internal voice was like hijacked by the New York Times or something, right? He was always just being like, there's a lot of dialogue in this. So I don't think, you know, I mean, it was just sort of, you know, it was just, you know, the Washington Post all day, all night, in my brain. So it took a long time to kind of find a different sort of privacy. I mean, you can't go back, you know, you can't turn the time back, right? So you can never discover the privacy and certainly anxiety and anticipation of being a debut writer who has yet to publish. Which is a time of anxiety and wonder and all of these sorts of things, but it's still quiet and it's still private. So you can't go back to that, so you have to find some other way. My mentor said to me one time, very beautifully, she said, one day you will find a way to live inside of the revised terms of your existence, which is a great lesson for everybody all the time, I think. And I did, sort of, maybe.
I like that. The revised terms of your existence. I like that. The Unsettled is set in the 1980s. Story alternates between the small town of Bonaparte, Alabama, and Philadelphia. What inspired the novel?
Quite a few things. You know, I should also say, you know, as I said, it took 8 years to write this thing. So sometimes I'm like, what did inspire it? Like, it was so long ago. It was so long ago. But a few things. I mean, one of them really, in a certain way, was a voice. I mean, one thing that was sort of an inspiration is an event, and the other thing was a voice. So the first, you didn't hear from her in the excerpt that I read, but there's this woman that lives in Bonaparte, the grandmother that Toussaint referenced. And she lives in this sort of, it's definitely a fictional town, but you know, I used to jokingly say that it was kind of like Wakanda, in that it's this kind of like all black settlement on a bend in a river. There's one way in, there's one way out, there are guards in the tree, you know, it is both mythical and real. But the person who lives there and is sort of the custodian of that place, which was once a very thriving place, and when we meet it, there are quite literally 5 octogenarian people left trying to sort of preserve this land and hold it down. All the kids have left, all the young people are gone. Duchess is one of these people. And you know, sometimes you get lucky. And she just was a voice that kind of came really early on. I didn't know what to do with her, but she was so strong and she was so clear that, you know, I was like, well, you know, obviously this woman has shown up here, so I'm not, you know, I'm not going to tell her to leave. And so you know, so I sort of hung out with her until we kind of figured out what her circumstance was. So that's kind of one inspiration, and very early on realized that place was very, very important in this book. And then the other sort of more event kind of based inspiration, I suppose inspiration's a hard word to use, but you know, the second half of this novel has 2 halves. So the first part of it is set, you're always kind of alternating between Philadelphia and Alabama. And in the first half, Duchess's daughter, Ava, is living in a homeless shelter. And and then the second half of the novel, she has kind of gotten involved with this very larger-than-life, charismatic figure from her past who, I won't say too much because you might have questions, also spoilers. But in any case, he's sort of interested in kind of forming this sort of utopic kind of, he's very interested in freedom, he's very interested in black freedom in particular, and so he kind of wants to found this kind of utopic sort of place. And that place, and what happens in that place, very loosely, it is not the story, I don't know, some people may be familiar with a group called MOVE that existed in Philadelphia for many years, who came to a very, very, very tragic end at the hand of the police and a bomb. And so it's not MOVE's story directly at all, but it certainly is, it's very much concerned with questions that came up from, I'm from Philadelphia, I was 11 when that happened, and it remains a wound in the city. And so it's much inspired by sort of questions that came up because of it.
Okay. Many of Philadelphia's city services, I would say, appear in your novel: homeless shelters, job agencies, public schools, healthcare, police, and they seem both similar to yet different from those that we have in Hartford today. We have both our current mayor and our future mayor in the room with us tonight.
Who does that?
I used to cover politics, what can I say? What do you think has changed in cities' infrastructures? Because you live in New York, so you have that context, since the 1980s, and what seems the same to you today?
It's an excellent question. I think, a sort of superficial thing that's changed. I don't know if I'm always of two minds of whether it's superficial or not. I think that people have sort of learned to talk to and about people a little bit better than they do in this novel. I also grew up in the 80s when anybody said any old thing to anybody at any point. It was just, it was a very inappropriate time, the 80s. And so, often in this book, social services and, all these, the ways in which they both speak to, but then the way that they speak to the people with whose care they are charged, also, the way they speak to them also sort of in some ways indicates how they feel about them, right? Or what they think of them, or what the structures and systems think of them. So I think that we're better at that. I think we're more mindful. I think we're more holistic in certain ways, right? I think that we realize that the world in which we deal is a lot bigger than the one that we thought that we were. I think that even in big cities, social services and government services can have a tendency to be a little bit insular and not realize the sort of like breadth and magnitude of just who's there and who needs help and what they need and how one might best offer it to them. So I think there are improvements in those ways. But I also think, and I think it's sort of a national problem as opposed to just a city problem. We are, with regard to people who, we have all these terms at low income and I prefer poor people. I grew up as one, and so which is a badge of honor to me. That's not a wound. But I think, we do live in a country that has a little bit of disdain for poor people. And I think we see it a lot. And I think that in some quarters we become slightly more aware sometimes that we are disdainful of poor people and but kind of blamey and but I think that I think we still have a long way to go. I'll put it that way.
You referenced libraries. You have a lot of references to libraries in the book. Can you talk about the role that libraries played in your life and your career?
Libraries were my childcare. I grew up with my mom, and actually, in a certain way, libraries were her sort of. My mother My mother was born in 1933, and she, in Philadelphia, we are many years of Philadelphia in my family. When she was 30, she decided that she did kind of clerical work. And when she was 30, she decided that she was bored with this. And that she sort of had this sense that she felt that, I think she was just dating somebody snooty, but also she sort of, she would go to these parties and be like, what are these people talking about? And then but it bothered her. It wasn't, she was just like, I feel like there's something that I don't know. I'm not clued into something. And so my mother's always been a voracious reader who was also a person who didn't have money to buy books. I mean, she's better read than I am, for sure, actually, in the classics, in any case. And so she spent an enormous time in libraries. And then she went to college when she was 30, so this is 1963. This is like a black woman of very modest means who just decides to put herself through college when she's 30. So that's sort of my library legacy, but then, we didn't have any money, and it's the 80s, and so very often libraries were that's where I went after school. It's, there's a library in Germantown, Philadelphia, which is mostly the neighborhood where I grew up, with the Cheltenham Library, and the Cheltenham Library was where I went after school, and I would take the bus there by myself, and when I was 8, little kid, and then my mother would come, and she would get me at 5:45, and there was a payphone in the front of the library, and when I got to the library, I would put my little dime in, my quarter, and I would call my mom at work, and I'd say, I'm at the library, and that's what we did every day. So libraries have had a pivotal role in my life, in terms of sentiment, but also in terms of my learning and my education and my value system, I think. Books were, for my mother, they were very much much of where her values lie, and so she sort of passed that on to me. And if you sort of grow up spending so much time in these temples of books, they become a little bit sacred to you. And I think that's what happened.
Do you consider your novel to be personal or political? You're allowed to say a little of both.
That's what I was going to say. So good. Yeah, I think absolutely a little of both. I think there are aspects of my life that I've sort of drawn on for the book, and then there are things that are absolutely and utterly foreign to anything that happened in my life. And I do think, cliche as it is, I do think sort of the personal is the political, and in particular, I think the historical is the political always. And I think that, I think sometimes one of the things that happens certainly with kids and young people, right, and they get really bored and they hate history because they just sort of teach it to you as this kind of series of dates, and you're just like, well, who cares, and you really can't blame them. And when's the Battle of Waterloo? They're like, oh my God, leave me alone. And I get it, right? But actually, all that big history, capital H is actually little history. It's just people doing things, right? It's just long history of people doing things and what the effects are of people doing things. Which means that it lives inside of people, right? Like it's us. We're making it right now. In big ways and in small ways. And so, more directly in answer to your question, in as much as I believe that the political is always historical and vice versa, these characters and any characters I've ever written are always, first and foremost, people. I'm a character writer. I'm not I attempt to be an artist. So I'm not interested in writing pamphlets, right? Like I have some essays I can do that with. So these folks have to feel like fleshed out psyches moving around, but they are also vectors of the time and place in which they find themselves. So they are also deeply historical beings, small h, right? In as much as they're just folks moving around on the stage of the world in which they live.
And when you started the novel, did you know how it was going to end?
I did. I mean, it actually changed a little bit, but I did because in part. No, how do I answer that? I'm just like spoilery, so spoilery. It was inspired by a thing that had an ending, and so.
Well done. I'm dangerously over time, but I have 2 more questions for you, and we could go all night. How do you make the decision? You write, I should add that you write a lot of nonfiction pieces that I've seen in the New York Times and elsewhere. How do you make the decision whether to explore a subject in fiction or in nonfiction?
That's a really, really great question. I don't know that I'm always making the decision. I think that, so I don't write short fiction. I'm pretty much oddly a novelist, which I don't know that I would have chosen, but that's how that is. And so but that means that these projects are very long, right? Like it means that they take a really long time. And so because they take so long, they generally have to sort of impress themselves upon me in some very particular way, and they have to impress themselves upon me generally through a character or a sort of a sensibility that this is going to sound very woo, but that feels fictional to me. And I don't know exactly how to describe that to you. It's a sensibility, it's a mood, it's a voice, it's a character, it's a sort of sense of colors in my mind, it's something like that. And that is usually pretty clear. And then other things, I also don't tend to work on more than one piece of fiction at once. So if I'm working on a book, then that's all I'm working on fictionally. So if I have anything else to say, too bad. You're just gonna have to say it. You're gonna have to say it in an essay or a book review. And I think that some of those subjects, for me, like I'm writing a series for the New York Times now that's called, it's a 5-essay series. It's called Imprinted by Belief, and it's about the sort of imprint of kind of religious ideas in more or less contemporary fiction. And those things are things that they do not strike me as something that I would think about in fictional terms. That strike me more as things that I would sort of think about in a sense of kind of building an argument and bringing things to bear on that argument, and fiction functions in a completely different way. So that was a long answer, but I guess the synthesized answer would be, it depends on what the function of the thing I'm making is, you know? And fiction for me, it doesn't build arguments, and it doesn't answer questions. It asks questions, and it observes. And nonfiction maybe does something that's a little bit different.
I want to write that down. That was, that was great. Finally, you can't read your book, The Unsettled, without being changed somehow by reading it. And I wondered how writing this book might have changed you as either a person or as a writer.
I think that, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's a new book, right? Like it's just been out since September 26th. I mean, mostly at the moment, I just feel tired, but it was a hell of a book, man. It really, and Edie and I were in a relatively contentious relationship for a good deal of its writing. Like we're not getting along, and we were in stalemates and standoffs, and we had a lot of fights, and it was just really, it was terrible. So I sort of emerged from that a little bit battered, but what I do think is that every book requires something very, very different. Hattie, my first novel, The 12 Tribes of Hattie, was very structured wildly differently, and had a very different set of concerns. This book's thematics, even just on a thematic level, is, I think, is sort of bigger, I think, in terms of thematics. I think it's a better book than the first book, which I think the first book was good. I'm proud of it, but I think I grew as a writer, and I think I wrote a better second book, which is what you should do, and I hope that I did. But this book is about so many things. This book is about land, and it's about land loss, and it's about freedom, and it's about black freedom, and it's about utopia, and it's about family fractures, and it's about people who love each other but kind of can't see the love that is being offered to them. I mean, it's about a lot of stuff. And in as much as you sort of talked about the fiction versus nonfiction thing, in as much as my job as a fiction writer is to locate all of these stories into sort of in hearts and minds that are moving around the world that I've invented for them, figuring out how to understand those thematics, not in sort of fact terms, but in heart and psyche terms, which are fictional terms, took a lot of time.
Well, you have been so generous with your time. Everyone has the book here, which is so great, so those who haven't had a chance to read it can do so. And thank you so much for joining us here at the Hartford Public Library. Ayanna Mathis.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for such incredible questions. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Let's have another round of applause for Ayanna Mathis. So I can't wait for my wife Emily to read the book and tell me how it ends, then I'll know what's going on. So storytelling. What is storytelling and how important is it to us as a society? Where do we make the time for storytelling? Who are the creators of the stories, and who are the people that document the stories? That's something we need to ask ourselves going forward, because we have this new short form of storytelling called Instagram and TikTok. And I don't think somebody could sit on stage for a half hour and speak as eloquently, as passionately, and as impactfully as Ayanna just did about her book. And so what we need to do as a society, what we need to do in this room tonight, is we need to make sure that we are creating space and opportunity for young storytellers. Make sure that those young storytellers understand the value of a full-blown novel. Make sure that they understand the value of telling stories about characters that have depth. Not two-dimensional stories, but three-dimensional stories. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to try to raise some funds in this room which create opportunities for the Hartford Public Library to support storytelling. And the work we're going to do in the next 15 to 20 minutes is going to impact the lives of children, whether it's Arun and Liza's kids, or my son, or your children, or kids you've never met. And maybe that's the most powerful impact you can have, is having an impact on the life of a child that you've never yet met. But maybe 30 years from now, they'll be sitting on stage telling their story, and those of us that are still around can come and write checks. There's one other thing I like to do before we get to the fund, the mission. How many people were here last year? All right. So you remember the virtual tour that we had of the library last year? Where's Joe? There's Joe. I wanted to take a moment to publicly acknowledge that every time I've seen Joe for the last 365 days, we've talked about these goggles. And I got to tell you, he's the best sport ever. Because, that's right, he laughs about it. He cries about it a little bit when nobody's looking, but he laughs about it. And I just want to say publicly, Joe, how much our community appreciates you and Bank of America for everything that you've done for the library, for our community. And despite last year's mishap, we still love you. So we're going to do some fundraising, and I'm going to ask people to raise their hands and make a pledge. You need to understand that there's a couple ways you can do this. If you are new school, you can get out your phone and capture the QR code on the back of your program, and you can make a donation that way. If you're old school, and it looks like we have some old school folks in the room, you can't do your taxes unless you have a voided out check. So you have to write a check. You can write a check and put it on this card, put it in the envelope, and somebody will come around and collect it. But either way, we need to get people to give, because if we give tonight, we make a difference in the lives of children. So get out your phones, get out your checkbooks, whatever you got to give, and we're going to go through some numbers, and we're going to see if we can raise some money. Now, I got off to, by the way, my name's Tim Sullivan. Hello, everybody. And I get the advantage of doing this every year, and I love doing it, but I get the advantage of having a little bit of an inside track. And so the first inside track we have tonight is the Mandel Bronstein Family Foundation, who is generously given $10,000. Let's hear it for them. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And the first question, is there anybody else in the room that's willing to step up and give $10,000? Uh-oh, I see a little lady over there sitting down. Raise her hand. What's your name, ma'am? Jerry Sullivan. Okay, Tim and Jerry Sullivan. Thank you. It's good to be junior on nights like this. Any other $10,000 donors in the room tonight? Okay, we'll catch you next time when the market's back up. The next donation is also a very generous donation of $7,500, and that comes from Andrew Diaz Matos and Josie Udick. So thank you, Josie and Andrew. Andrew's looking at me like, I didn't give $7,500. Thank you so much. The next ones we have are, I think it's Sarah and Jim, not Jim and Sarah, because I think Sarah's the one that actually wrote the check. Sarah and Jim Needham for $6,000. And Phyllis Shakora and Doug Cohen for $5,000. So if my math's right, I think we're close to $30,000 already. We're off to a good start. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask if there's anybody else in the room that can step up for $5,000. We got one right there. Thank you very much. Anybody else for $5,000? Okay. We're going to make our way to $2,500. $2,500 is a small price to pay to change the lives of a young storyteller. Do we have anybody in the room for $2,500? There we go, Mr. Robinson. Thank you very much. I should say Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. This is always a team effort. Anybody else for $2,500? Oh, we got one in the back of the room. Thank you. Another one in the back of the room. Thank you. Another one over there. I believe that's Mary Laporte. My eyesight's going, but I think it's Mary Laporte. Anybody else for $2,500? Okay, thank you. We're going to make our way to $1,000 now. Now, a lot of people in the room are like, oh, now they're in my comfort zone. $1,000, that sounds good. So if you're in for $1,000, please stand up so we can applaud for all of you at once. Stand up if you're in for $1,000. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's awesome. I noticed Arunan looked over his shoulder and saw that Luke stood up, and he's like, okay, I guess this is where the mayor stands up. I got to stand up. The next one we have is $500. Please stand if you can do $500. Emily, now's a good time to stand. Carla, all right, the Proctors, a lot of good familiar faces here. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the $500. And my last benchmark donation is $250. How many people can we get for $250? Please stand up. $250. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So you're going to that QR code and or the checkbook, and you're going to make that donation, and Jill will keep track of it, and we might be able to hear on later how we did. Now, I did a little research today as I was getting ready for this, and I said, let me go read a little bit more about the history of the Hartford Public Library. I knew it was our 249th anniversary. And one of the things I found out is that in the late 1800s, the library was at the Wadsworth Athenaeum. It was actually a room in the Wadsworth Athenaeum. And back then, they decided they needed to have a fundraiser, a capital campaign, so they could section off part of the library and pay for the maintenance and make sure everybody had access to a free public library. So they put a call out to the community, and they were overwhelmed by the response. There were over 2,000 people that donated to the Hartford Public Library in 1892 to keep it going, to make sure it was free, and make sure everybody had access. And amongst those donors were some big names like Goodwin and Morgan and Keeney. But there were also, and maybe more importantly, a lot of little donors. There was a kindergarten class at West Middle School that put all their nickels together and came up with $2.90 to donate to the Hartford Public Library. How about that? $2.90 from the kindergarten class at West Middle. So what I'm going to ask everybody else in the room to think about those nickels and to think about what you can give. Where does your threshold hit where you're like, yep, I did something good tonight? So if you can give a nickel or a quarter or $1 or $5 or $10, reach into your pocket, reach into your phone. You're probably using a phone if you're giving that little amount of money. Reach into your phone, scan that barcode, and give whatever it is that you can afford to give, because every single dollar is going to make a difference. So let's have a big round of applause for those kindergarten kids and the 2,000 donors. All right, so Jill, I don't know, but it feels like we just raised a lot of money. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, the last thing I get to do before I step down is I get to introduce the Caroline M. Hewins Medal presentation. And for those of you that don't know about Caroline M. Hewins, she was a librarian here for 51 years. And there's a special medal that's given out. And if you go to the website, you can see who some of the past winners were. But this year, the library is giving out that medal, and it's a big special honor. And I feel fortunate enough that I know the person that put together the film. There's a young filmmaker in Hartford that I know pretty well. His name is T.J. Noel Sullivan. And unbeknownst to Luke, they asked TJ to go around the community and talk to a few folks about what the library means and what Luke means to the library. So with no further ado, let's see the video.
Luke has always been a champion for us.
He has given it his all and then some.
He is a caring, loving, kind person.
If a mayor is behind you, it makes a huge difference because he's an advocate. He's supporting and he's saying, yes, this library, this program is making a difference in our community.
You know, Luke was involved with the Hartford Public Library even before he became mayor.
Despite the different roles, right, going from board member to mayor, it never changed his commitment to the library and his passion for the work that the library does each and every day.
So for years, we've talked about we want to get a new library on Park Street because there was one there before. And the fact is that everyone comes in and say, yeah, we're going to build a library, and nothing ever gets done. But Luke was that kind of person that say, we have to get this library done.
When we decided to modernize our buildings, the Park Street branch, now with the Barber Street branch, has always been there for us in terms of making sure we had what we needed in order to make these projects work.
Especially at the time when we were facing bankruptcy, to maintain as much support as we could to the library, it required a lot of support from funders outside of the city.
He obviously played a huge role in Hartford Travelers and Aetna contributing to the city's turnaround.
And he asked if we would make a $50 million donation together, $10 million a year over 5 years. That money would go towards the library.
Those 5 years helped fund the library's operating budget on a year-to-year basis, which not only kept them servicing the community, but allowed them to fulfill its long-term strategy as well.
The mayor, by supporting our library, has also supported the American Place.
Not every community has a library like the Hartford Public Library. Traditionally, when we think of libraries, we just think of them as spaces, right, where you can borrow a book or a movie. But in a city like Hartford, where there are so many needs, we know that as a community and as a library system, we have to find, different ways that we can meet those needs.
Offering citizenship classes or ESL classes or digital literacy classes, but bringing in the community to serve as volunteers and help immigrants maybe prepare for citizenship.
Luke is somebody that fundamentally believes that we are all deserving, that we should all have equal access. The library represents one of those sacred spaces that are left in our society, in our country, where everyone is welcome.
It is this open community. It serves the entire community. It views its mission well beyond just literacy.
We have been very, very fortunate to have a mayor that's extremely welcoming, and you can see that. You can even see that when he comes to our naturalization ceremony, and he brings up his guitar and he starts singing, and you don't see that anywhere. And then he stays till the very end, shakes everybody's hand. It's something that I can't really explain unless you see the way he interacts with our community. I feel it's very genuine.
One of the elements that's been really exciting has been the partnership between the University of Connecticut and the Hartford Public Library. With everything we've built here in Hartford for our Hartford campus, we didn't have to build a library. But we have access to one of the best libraries in the world. And that's because the mayor had the vision to say, you know what, let's utilize our resources and work together.
He really righted the ship of the city and allowed it to continue to be a vibrant community of arts and culture and food and diversity.
I think he loves our library. Maybe if he could choose a second career, he would become a librarian. I don't know,
Mayor Broning, congratulations on the Caroline Hewins Award.
Well deserved, well deserved.
You not only have made the library a stronger organization, but you've also made Hartford a stronger city.
We can't thank you enough for your service. We were lucky to have you as mayor for the last 8 years.
Thank you, Mayor Broning. شهردار عزیز، از فعالیت‌هایی که برای کتابخانه ما کردید سپاسگزارم.
I really appreciate you. I love you. And congratulations on your award.
The Caroline Hewins Medal recognizes an individual who embraces the city of Hartford and its people, who breaks the mold and provides service of a revolutionary kind, who stretches the boundaries of a social or cultural institution with a humanistic approach to public service, and who shows strong guardianship of and advocacy for the basic right of equal access to information and opportunity. We are thrilled to present the Caroline Hewins Award to Mayor Luke Bronin.
Mr. Mayor? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Greg Davis, and I've served on the library board for many years, and I just wanted to take an opportunity to recognize and thank Luke for all of his service to the Hartford Public Library in the city of Hartford. I recall back in 2014, I believe it was, Thea Montanez and I interviewed Luke for the board of the Hartford Public Library, and he got a huge thumbs up. And so Luke comes to his first board meeting and he has a brown bag lunch. So Thea and I look at each other like, did we make the right decision? This guy's coming to the meeting with a paper bag lunch. But we quickly learned that Luke asked the tough questions. He was engaged, he was passionate, and he really, really was concerned about the city of Hartford and the Hartford Public Library. A couple years later, Luke becomes the mayor of Hartford, and things change a little bit because he has a different role. But I can say to you that our Park Street Library would not have happened without the municipal support of both Luke and Pedro Segarra as mayors, who were champions of the Hartford Public Library. But I do recall Luke and I had a couple of battles about the budget because, in the library we're always pushing for the budget, and Luke, as the mayor, was concerned about the city's budget. But there was never any question about his concern, his passion and support of the Hartford Public Library, and his confidence in Bridget and her team. And I would say that it has been a pleasure watching Luke grow as the mayor and as a champion for the city of Hartford. And I think we've all been blessed by his presence as mayor and as a huge supporter of the Hartford Public Library. And I cannot think of a better person to receive this award. And Luke, we owe you a lot, and thanks so much, and wish you all the best, sir.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Thank you, David. Thank you, Greg. Those of you who know me, and that's a lot of the people in here, know that I tend to cry, and I determined not to do it today, but that movie and all those words are conspiring against me, but I'm going to do my best. So it was funny listening to Arunan's remarks, because about 10 years ago, I went over to Jerry Sullivan's house and I sat down on her couch, and she said, "You should get more involved in the Hartford Public Library." And I did, and I am so grateful for that, because that was my first form of service to this city. I fell in love with the library. I got to meet then president of the board of the Hartford Public Library, Thea Montanez. Who has been more than my right hand these last 8 years. She has been the fullest partner in this work. I think maybe I should just yield my time back to Ayanna, because it was really good listening to her speak. You did such a beautiful job, and we're so grateful to have you in this city tonight, and thank you for your incredible words. You just spent 8 years writing that book. I spent the last 8 years, and it's still not done. And really, there's no end in sight, but that's okay, because we've got a great team coming in next in Arunan and the team that he's bringing in. And I love the fact that for Arunan, too, the route to service in this city was through the Hartford Public Library, because I don't think there's any better place to recognize and to learn both how much need there is in our community, how much we can do as a community when we come together, how lucky we are to have amazing institutions like this. This really is a place like no other. We're a city with lots of challenges. We're a city that is one of the poorest in the country. We're a city where we often think about how we've got to try to fix something that feels broken. But with the library, we don't have to fix something that feels broken. We have to sustain and build and expand something that is one of the best in the entire country. This place is a blessing for Hartford. When I cast my vote this past Tuesday for my successor in the city council, I walked into that library, which had hosted so many debates 8 years ago and then again today. I walked into 2 classes where new Americans are preparing for citizenship, and talked with the students in those classes. I thought back on all of the times that I've been in those libraries, and whether it was United Way partnering with the library on volunteer income tax assistance so people can get their refunds back, or whether it is the jazz performances in the library, whether it is teenagers who have their own space to create and to explore digital media in a way that they never could anywhere else, whether it's seeing somebody who just came back from prison and is part of our community, sitting at that computer applying for jobs, whether it's people just meeting in a cafe that hopefully we'll get back sometime soon when the renovations are done. And I'm talking not just about the downtown library, but about our branches, where after school you see an influx of young people coming into those oases and finding both a place of safety, but also a place of imagination and discovery. This place is extraordinary. And I am so grateful to have been partners with you in getting through some really tough times in the city and making sure that we kept the library strong. I know I'm going on a little long here, but I have a few more things to say. So when 8 years ago, when this team, my team came in, bankruptcy was very, very real. And we knew that the first things to get cut would be the things that were perceived as non-essential. And we knew that that meant that so much was at risk, but that meant the library was at risk. But we also knew that we viewed the library as absolutely essential. And so when we went to those companies, who you heard in that video, to the Aetna and the Travelers and the Hartford, and asked them to step up, it's because we wanted to make sure that if we had to go through that this incredible community institution was protected. And they stepped up in such big ways. And all of you are stepping up in such big ways now to make sure that we honor the spirit of Caroline Hewins, who wasn't just a librarian, but who changed the way libraries worked, who turned what was a private library public, who then expanded its services and built the national model for what a library serving children could be, just as this library now is building the national model of what libraries serving new Americans can be, and what libraries serving those without digital access can be. And if history is just a lot of people doing things, you all and the library team and everybody here is making history by continuing to make sure that Hartford has, for many decades to come, the best library system, and I think the best, not just the best urban library system, I think the best library system in the country. And I'm so deeply grateful to have been partners with you, and so grateful for your friendship. So. Sorry. And in 2 years, we're going to get to be able to look at the pictures of the Barber Street and Albany Avenue libraries that will look just as good as the Park Street one.
Well, I do have an update. Thank you to your generosity. We have raised $87,500 this evening. Thank you so much. And you can continue to give on our website to help support all of the wonderful programs that you've heard about tonight. So thank you for being with us. Dessert and coffee is served. Thank you to our sponsor, Dan. Thank you for being our honorary chair, and to Global Atlantic, and all of our sponsors. Thank you for being with us, sharing these very special moments this evening with Ayanna and with Mayor Bronin. What a wonderful evening we've had together. Thank you so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.